Hi everyone. Today I have another cool piece to show you. This one's actually a semi-custom, so not a full custom knife, and it's from a maker called Jbin out of China. And I think Jbin is not very well known yet, but I've been following him for quite a while because um, if you follow him for a while, you would know that he's actually um, kind of like a custom knife maker slash knife modifier. So he's no joke, one of the best um, people who can grind knife blades in the world. From seeing his, Instagram videos, etc., he does all of his complex grinds by hand, and that's something that most makers or most people may not appreciate, and that's what he was known for in the beginning. And now he's jumping on this new venture where he partners up with Riot to make most of the pieces, and then he hand finishes some of the parts. So that's why this one's a semi-custom. This one in particular is not hand ground by him, but I believe it was hand rubbed by him. Let's get into this knife in a little more detail, and I guess I want to go into the history of why this is special. I think most people, if you look at the knife, you may think, oh, it's just a regular frame lock flipper with some inlays, which is neat. But actually, I know, or I can kind of guess how this design came about, and what's the thought process behind it, and it's quite fascinating. And I think most of the newer reviewers, I think reviewers these days, there are not many reviewers who are doing high-end knives. And when I say high-end, I mean four, 5,000, 10,000, $20,000 knives. Most are doing production knives, so they don't really know the history behind this as much. But as someone who's been following the scene for a while, I can tell you where the inspirations came from, just by looking at it. So start off, I can't believe I didn't say this before, but this one is called the Samurai, by the maker Jbin. And since he is out of China and he's a custom maker, some of you may know that there are a select group of Chinese collectors who collect very high-end knives. You would see at all of the custom knife shows, there's a few guys, or maybe one or two, who buy the highest end knife, bid the highest amount of money, and they always win. Some of the best knives are there over in China, and the Chinese are a close knit group of people, and they hang out together. So every once in a while, you would see in the Instagram posts that they get together, share knowledge, share their knives, and talk to each other about what makes them special, what makes them unique, and what they like about each knife. So the first thing I'm going to say that if I guess in maybe 2014 era, 2015, one of the hottest makers is John Barker, and he was known for his American Tanto. If you don't know, John Barker has been making knives for quite a while, and he got inspiration from Bob Lum to do the American Tanto. Um, this very unique design, and essentially it's quite a difficult grind to achieve, and quite a complex one at that. To grind the bevel, and then you have this flat tip right here where you see it's still about satin. Sometimes it's a zero edge without this polish edge, but even for John Barker, he often also puts the secondary edge on this. But essentially, it's a really aggressive cool looking design, but also a difficult grind to make because of the complexity of each lines, and specifically to make it even on both sides. Check this out. This one is actually very, very well done. You can see, even some of John's work, the bevels are not even, but this one is perfect. That's the first inspiration. People really liked John Barker's knives, specifically for the blade grind and the design. And I believe that's the inspiration for this one. So similar, not exactly the same. The model is called the Hokkaido on that one. If you want to go check it out later, you can. The second inspiration that I've noticed is actually the pivot. These geometric designs are very reminiscent of what Todd Rexford has been doing in recent years. I think that's maybe a little misleading. He doesn't have a pivot exactly in this shape, but if you notice the design cues from Todd Rexford, some of the things that he's really known for is the pivot design, along with the frame design, where it's very geometric, very beautiful, and in this case, very well done. And so is this one. Beautifully designed pivot, which is black Timascus, and a pivot collar as well. So that's quite neat. And then both sides. You can notice that he has a proprietary hardware, and he does give you the tool, which I have right here. Not that I'm going to open it anytime soon, because the action is perfect. And speaking of the action, as a collector, I like to collect something unique. And when J-Bin was showing off the knives, there was one in particular that says this word, Lee. It says Lee on it. And do you know why? It's because it's from, inspiration is from Lee Williams. And Lee Williams, I think he's one of the most popular, tactical knife makers, especially since 2010, even a little bit before, way up until today. I think his popularity has been slowing down little by little, and he's really known for his kickstop mechanism. But essentially, the way he tunes his detent, he's the one who does the flat detents. The knives are really snappy, and this one is the only one that I've seen from J-Bin tuned like a Lee Williams. So the detent is quite strong, but it snaps out really hard, and it closes extremely smoothly. It's really strong detent, really snappy action. These days, I think people tend to prefer a more balanced action that doesn't fire as hard. Before, people used to have the preference for flippers that come out the fastest, fire the hardest. This is definitely, going back to that era. And again, the Chinese collectors, they have a bunch of Lee Williams, and of course, this is when you tune the knife, you can kind of gauge like the preference of what the people prefer in high-end knives, and that's how J-Bin was able to achieve such a wonderful action. Another thing that I've noticed, I actually have his other knife called the Primark, and I opened it up. Guess what's inside? The bearings are actually roller bearings, and obviously the roller bearings, these ones are single roll roller bearings, and that's the inspiration from Shigorov knives. Sergey uses it on his custom division knives, these single roll roller bearing systems, and it's present here too. So, I think this knife is kind of like for those who've been in the game for a long time, you can really appreciate all the little inspirations from the blade grind, the roller bearings that make the knife extra smooth, the snappy detent like Lee Williams. Um, yeah, I mean, that's really really cool. Um, I think one of the other aspects, I haven't shown you the lock side too much, but one of the other aspects which make this knife unique, I don't know if you notice, but it's completely screwless besides the pivot. Um, this is actually interesting. I think this is unlike a lot of makers. Usually you would have at least one screw on the show side or the lock side, but there's none except for the pivot. So I obviously had to go searching through, and I found that there is a screw which I suspect you need to take this one apart in order to take apart the knife. It's in the backspacer right in the middle. I think this is quite an amazing design. I haven't taken this knife apart because the action already feels so good, but I'm quite sure that that's the screw you need to remove to take out different pieces and then start disassembling the knife. But, I may be wrong. But I'm quite sure that particular screw has something to do with how you take apart the knife. And I think that's really, really cool to see. That's something I believe that's unique. I haven't seen that design before, I believe. Yeah, not in the flipper knife, at least. I believe there was one by Michael Raymond where he did have a screw in the backspacer, but I'm not sure. I don't believe it was for the same purpose because that one is an integral. This one is not. This one's definitely two pieces put together with screws hidden in the backspacer, I believe, and the pivot. The overall design is actually really, really lovely. I think if you look at amateur knife makers or knife designers, everything would be just flat. I always reiterate this, but if you look at someone who's more attuned to the aesthetics and the comfort, you would see how there are a bunch of chamfers everywhere to make sure that it's not only aesthetically more beautiful, but it's very comfortable to hold. Just check out that backspacer. His logo on, the lock bar relief. Even the lock bar itself has the chamfer and all the way through, which is not easy to do because the lock bar is where you use to tune the knife, right? And taking every chunk out means the action will be slightly different, and you have to tune every single piece. So you have to ensure that everything is just perfect. One thing though that I can comment on, which I don't like as much, is the pocket clip. This one does not have a lot of space inside, but I think the retention is quite stiff. I think it's stiffer than most knives, and even with two hands it can be quite difficult to put it in, especially because the top part does not have a lot of lip, so you kind of have to jam it in there. One of the other details which I quite appreciate is here. You can't jam your thumb against the blade at all because of this little backspacer which comes up and covers everything. So even when you're flipping and you're like putting the meat of your finger in there, you won't hit, it won't really snag on your skin. And I think this is something that's essential on a knife like this, and really glad to see it here. Another detail, which I really like, is that he's using Vanex. Vanex, for those of you who don't know, it's actually quite difficult to find. It's got really high, I guess, it's really high edge retention, I believe. It's not as tough as some of the other steels, but it's completely rust proof. So something like this would fit right in any saltwater series. If it comes in contact, stays in saltwater for a bit, you don't have to worry about it. But of course, this whole knife, not the whole knife is waterproof because of parts like steel, which is on the pivot, etc. So would still not recommend it to be a saltwater knife, although you can use the blade to cut, I don't know what you would cut, like fruits or something that might rust the blade, but the blade stock is a bit too thick for that. Anyways, there you have it. Really interesting knife from J-Bin, the Samurai. Highly recommend for you guys to check him out. I'd definitely be gunning for one of his full customs where he does his own hand ground blades, and especially his mirror polish ones. Those ones are flawless. So yeah, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful rest of the day.